Hi, and welcome to the Reinvented Delaware podcast. And today we're going to talk about the creative mind. So we had a question from one of our listeners asking what inspires our creativity, or how do we think of the ideas. I will say I think Cindy's got much more creativity than I do, but we're going to talk a little bit about how we get ideas for projects and how we come up with different things. So,
yeah, this is going to be a fun one. We're so glad that you're back and listening, and we hope that you enjoyed this. Before we get started, if you have any questions for us anytime, feel free to comment. Feel free to send me an email at cindy@reinventeddelaware.com. We want this podcast to be about you, don't we?
We do.
Yeah, we want to help you in your adventure in repurposing and upcycling, and we just want to be right there with you. So feel free to contact us anytime. Today we're going to talk about the creative mind, but before we jump into that, what have you been up to lately?
Really haven't been doing a lot of projects. I've been out in our garden. This is the time of year where the weeds are at battle. So
that's a constant.
Yeah. So we've had picked a few vegetables, and I've been doing more gardening, some maintenance things on the car, and really some stuff like that. I haven't really been out to the shop a whole lot.
Okay. Well, that's kind of the nature of the way life goes sometimes.
Yep.
You're still working on your shop. That's coming.
It is not started yet, so yes,
that's
but
okay.
it is coming.
We'll keep you updated on that.
Yeah, we'll probably give you some pictures and videos, and we'll keep you updated on the progress.
Yeah, definitely.
So what I've been told is that once they start, it goes very quickly. So,
yeah, that's going to be an exciting week, and we'll keep you updated. Now, I've been working on our front porch because it was a disaster. It was cobwebs all over the place, and it just needed some really major help. So I've been cleaning it up, and then I've got those chicken feeders hanging. Oh my gosh. They're so cute. You're going to love them. And if I can remember, I'll pop in a little picture, or that video may or may not be out yet. I'm not really sure. So whatever it is, I'll link it.
If it's
coming.
not out, it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. So today we're going to talk about creativity. And Steve just said that he feels like I'm more creative than him. I beg to differ. I might come up with these ideas, but somebody has to be creative enough to come up with the way to implement the idea. And that's where this has been a real team effort. I've come up with the creative idea for this furniture or home decor piece, but Steve has taken his creativity and his skill level and combined them to get the thing done. For the most part, that's what's been happening. So as far as where my creative mind comes from, some of it is just innate. I mean, sometimes you just have it in you to kind of think outside the box. And I think I've done a lot of that over the years. I remember being a little girl. Have I told you this story? So when I was a little girl, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Well, it wasn't a word then. It was a business owner. I wanted to have my own store. And the store that I was going to have was going to be a restaurant. I know I'm not much of a I'm not much of a cook, but in my mind, the restaurant was in the woods next to where we lived. We lived right in a wooded section, and we went in and we raked out the area, and I set up this little restaurant, and between trees I had where the tables were set up, and I would serve salad. Back in the day before dandelion greens were popular to put on a salad, I was putting dandelion greens on a salad. That was my romaine. That was my salad. So that's kind of where some of that creative spirit just started right out of the gate as a little girl with a lot of playtime. So if you have kids, by the way, send them outside, get their creative minds going, because you never know where it's going to lead. And then as far as the other inspiration that I get where we are now, I get inspiration from all sorts of places. I love Pinterest. Do you like Pinterest?
I do like Pinterest.
I can get on Pinterest and scroll and scroll and scroll. There are so many ideas. And I wouldn't say that I copy ideas. I'm not doing that. But if you see someone else's idea, I don't know what happens, but in your mind, it just kind of spurs, oh, I have something similar. I could do a similar thing. Then you start working on it, and it just gets your creative mind thinking. And before you know it, your project looks completely different. So Pinterest for me can be a real starting point as far as that's concerned. I know you like magazines.
Well, I think in the age of social media, inspiration has changed quite a bit. In other words, because I grew up and I've always been a motorcycle enthusiast from probably 10 years old or so. But you had to go out and buy the motorcycle magazines. In other words, we didn't have the internet. Where now I get on Pinterest and look at motorcycles, and it's like you said, you're not copying the idea, but you may like the way someone has something mounted, and so you're gonna try that. But I think the whole social media, YouTube, Google, I mean, there's just so much out there now that we didn't have when we were younger.
Yeah, so we might be magazine kind of people, but also there's online inspiration. We've both done a little bit of both. I have a stack of magazines. In fact, just recently, one of our projects was in a magazine, wasn't it?
Yes, it was featured.
That was so exciting to have one of our projects show up in a magazine. It was pretty exciting. So as far as other ways of being creative and kind of getting that ball rolling, I like to think outside of the box. When I see a certain piece, I think I shared it a couple of weeks ago about a wash stand heart. That's a hard word for me to say. But I used that piece and we turned it into a completely different piece of furniture. So you have to kind of think outside of the box when you are out shopping, whether it's at a thrift store or an auction. Think outside of the box of what the original purpose of that piece was, and turn it into something else. Like I will take, there were these buckets that had holes in them for minnows. Like if you're out fishing and you need to keep fresh minnows, what are they called?
They are minnows.
Okay,
Minnows.
so there's it's like a pail, and a bucket. Maybe that's a better word. It's a bucket, and there's like a metal mesh around this bucket so that water can flow in and out. And you would keep your minnows in there so that when you're out fishing, you can grab these fresh minnows and use them as bait for bigger fish. Did I explain that?
You explained that right, yes.
Because it's not like I've ever done that before, but I can imagine that's what this bucket is used for. Well, when I've seen these mesh-shaped bucket things, I've literally inverted it in my mind, and I see like a lampshade. This thing could be an amazing lampshade. And if we've taken a hanging light fixture from Amazon, I can get those on Amazon very easily, and turn one of these buckets into a hanging lamp for maybe an outdoor patio or something like that. They're really cute. But the point of that is the thing that you look at, think outside of the box, turn it upside down, turn it sideways, and just start thinking what that shape could also be. The shape of this bucket was a lampshade. Even though that was not the intended purpose of it, it was definitely the shape of a lampshade. And I just thought that was really a fun way to kind of get a hanging light. Another thing that I do a lot, and you might have something to share about this, I like to look at a piece, and when I go out shopping, think about what I need for our home. Like if there is a specific, let's say I needed a coffee table or I needed a side table. When I go out looking, that might be what I'm specifically looking for, and that can spur on the creativity. The table that I have in mind might be completely different from what I actually find, but that is the thing that spurs the creativity, that I get that table and I wind up loving it even more than the one that I initially thought that I wanted, but yet it's a whole creative adventure there and a whole different piece than what I started out to be. I hope I explained that well. I feel like I got a little turned around.
No, I think you did a good job. And again, the need is certainly an inspiration. So if we are needing something for the house, and I know on our previous podcast, you talked about a toolbox that we put Queen Anne's legs on, and you marketed that as when someone come into the house, they can put their gloves, their hats, those things, and so it's out of sight and kind of keeps it a little more tidy. So I think when we need something, we will look, especially when we're out thrifting or we are going to OMAs, because there's just such a variety of things there. And so we'll look at things and say, hey, that would work if we did this and this and this, or if we added this, we could use that to meet that need. So, and then that becomes very creative, and we'll add to it, maybe accent it a little bit. And so once we have the idea, and once we have the materials, sometimes we will double up and the creativity continues to flow. So I think we're adding some stuff. I really like. I subscribe to a few woodworking magazines because I like to read about the techniques, but a lot of them have projects. Some of them are way beyond my skill set, but I still like the idea. And I think of I did readers' desks. And so the original project was very, very ornate.
Oh, it was a writer's desk.
Writer's desk,
yes.
That's it. Yeah, writer's desk. And so it's a small wooden box, has an angled top that would hold a sheet of paper, and then the top lifts, and you could put pencils or pens and documents in there. And so I got that inspiration from a magazine. However, the project in the magazine was very, very elaborate, but I liked the design. And so I just went out and I built one, and I didn't make it nearly as elaborate. And then that came out okay, and then I started to add some of the things, the dovetails, the sliding drawers, and things like that. So my first one's very basic. It was a very basic box, but as I continued to build the skill, I added some of the more elaborate things to it. And so I think the final projects were actually much better than the first project. And I know we've given some as gifts, and you've sold a few.
Yep, we did, and I kept one. That's where I keep a lot of my art supplies. I dabble in a little bit of art, not anything fancy, but that's where I keep some of my art supplies, and it's a nice way to store them. But I think you did a really great job on looking at that writer's box example in the magazine and then turning it into your style and the way that you wanted to make it. And you also progressed on skills while you were doing it. So it was kind of twofold. Now, some of the magazines that he reads are more about woodworking projects, and you can give me some names of those magazines, and I'll stick them down in the description in case you're interested in some of these types of these ways of being inspired for woodworking projects. I have a couple of magazines. In fact, the magazine that one of our projects just appeared, I'm going to link that one down below because I think that you're going to enjoy watching that seeing that magazine. So I'll link the ones that I enjoy, and I'll link a couple of that you enjoy, and then you can check out down below in the description or in the show notes so that you can look into those magazines as well.
And this isn't your first time being featured in a magazine. So you were featured by the Pioneer Woman, I think.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. That's a great magazine, the Pioneer Woman. Yeah, she has a wonderful one.
So a little bit of history before Cindy got started with the podcasting, or blogging, I guess I should say, not the podcasting. But she was reading the Pioneer Woman, and I remember her telling me, she's like, this woman gives away cameras and the mixers, their higher end.
KitchenAid.
Yeah, KitchenAid mixers, and she makes money from her blog, and she's got these advertisers, and they do business, and that's what I want to do. And quite honestly, I didn't give it a second thought. And now
it seemed like a pie in the sky kind of idea, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like I've always wanted to be Batman, and I know that's probably not going to happen. So I kind of gave it that kind of a thought. Oh, okay.
Do you still want to be Batman?
Yes, I still want to be Batman. But when you think about, or I think about now, her blog is successful, and I think you just reached 18,000, or was that YouTube?
We're almost at 18,000 on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's got a lot of followers and
18,000 subscribers. I guess. Yeah.
Yep. And but I also remember, I think it's been about a year, maybe a little longer, that you got contacted by the Pioneer Woman. They had seen one of her blogs, and they actually featured it in that magazine. So, just dreams come true.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, we want to get back to the topic of creativity. Let's talk about some perseverance if you want to learn a new technique, because that's part of creativity. You get really good at a skill, you do it over and over and over again, and then you're like, okay, what's next? Because a lot of creative people, that's what they're ready to go to the next thing. I know I have a little bit of problem with that, because you want to improve your skills for sure, but you also want to stay open to learn new techniques. So let's chat about that a little bit. I would say if you want to learn a new technique, before you really jump into it, depending on what the technique is, do your research. Make sure that that is something that you really have in your head that you can start to tackle. I know one of the things that you might mention might be about dovetails. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually, when I think about this, I think about the opening scenes to the movie The Patriot. If you've never seen that, I think it's dated from the 90s.
Favorite
yeah, great
movies.
movie.
Yeah.
But in the opening scenes, Mel Gibson, who is the star of the movie, is making a rocking chair. And he sits down in it, and he rocks back and forth, and it collapses, and then you see him, he picks it up in disgust, and he throws it, and where he throws it is a pile of broken rocking chairs that he has failed to make. And that kind of resonates with me because you can see something and think, oh, I could do that, but then when you actually start hands-on, it becomes a lot more challenging than you thought it was. And for a lot of people, they just give up. Like, okay, that was more than I thought, so I'm not going to do it. And I think that's where perseverance comes in. I think you need to, as you said, research, make sure that you do have the skill set, but then also be open to learning that, hey, there's some things with this that I'm not real comfortable with, but I'm going to learn how to do it.
Yeah, and I think that research is a great way to do that. There are lots of YouTube videos. You can find just about anything on YouTube nowadays, and there's so many blogs. So if you are wondering, for instance, how to make a rocking chair, you just do a little search and you're going to be filled with all sorts of tutorials. So make sure that you do that kind of research. Now, just recently, I started using transfers. So transfers are a design that is on a clear film that you can take and apply it to all different mediums, whether it's a piece of furniture, or I even did a transfer on a cloth bag, which turned out really good. I can link that video. Y'all seem to be loving that project so far. I've put a transfer on
Got a lot of positive comments.
Yeah, I did. Yep. And then that milk can. But anyway, it's a way to get an artistic piece of art sort of on. I have one over there, as a matter of fact. I'm not going to pull it out now, but when I started to learn about how to do a transfer, I just did my research before I actually started doing it. And the way that I did research was I just searched how to do a transfer, and some videos came up, some blog posts came up, and then I thought, I'm just going to do it. So I grabbed a transfer, and the first time I ever used a transfer was on one of my journals. And I applied a really simple design on the outside of this journal, and I thought, I can do this. I'm going to try it. So I went on from there and did some more. And each time that I've added a transfer, I've just improved my skill a little bit more. And then it gets your ideas of I could put a transfer on this, I could put it on that. And it just opens up your mind to just start trying.
Yeah, and I think the research is important, along with being able to find some instructions on how to do a project. Just be forewarned that you're also going to see hundreds, if not thousands, of tools that tell you they make that process easier. And oftentimes the tool is very complicated to use, or it doesn't actually do. And so Cindy and I have talked about it, and I think making do with less forces you to be creative.
I agree.
Because you want to cut an arc, or you want to, and she was talking about dovetails. I can do it. I'm not very good at it. They're really ugly, but I have a jig that will help me.
They're actually very nice. He's kind of undercutting himself here.
Well,
yeah,
they're not as nice as some that I've seen. But what I will do is, if I have a project and I know the original or the inspiration project had a long row of dovetails, I know that I probably can't do that, but I can do one or two, and then I can make it 3 or 4. And so just try to improve that skill set until I become good. And I'm still working at it. That's something that I very much want to learn. And again, I've improved. If you saw my first ones, they were like really, really bad. So like Cindy said, my dovetail work has improved. I still don't think I'm at that level of some of the craftsmen I've watched on YouTube.
Well, I think that's part of creativity, is you're never going to reach that level. Like you should always be wanting to improve upon your skills. I just think that that's a good thing. And even on creativity, you always want to improve on that and keep your mind open. I know I've been through some times where I've had some challenges with creativity, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But another big thing to think about is don't be afraid to fail. I really feel like we've talked about this before. Actually, we've talked about this a lot in our own private life. When you fail at something, then you learn what not to do. And that might seem a backwards way of learning, but in my mind, it's really helpful. That is the way to learn, is by making a mistake, having a mishap, doing something incorrectly, so that the next time you know not to do it that way because you know it didn't work. So what do you think about that?
I agree. And some of the mishaps they might not be your fault. And so I think of wood turning, where I have, and I will collect wood when I'm cutting firewood, and I've put it on the lathe, and I'll start out, and it's going to start out as this huge bowl. And then as I get into it, I find a rotted spot, or there's a, can't think of what inclusion, where the bark has grown inside. And so
whoa. What is that? This is off topic, but I have to know, what is this? What are you talking about?
I think, because I'm not an arborist, but I think it's where the tree had an injury many years ago, and there's actually bark on the inside of the tree, and then the tree grew around it, and that doesn't go away. And they call that an inclusion. So there's actually an area of bark.
Oh my! I have never heard of that. Wow.
Yeah, it's actually quite common, but I know on the lathe I've gotten pieces, literally been turning them and come into to go to bed, and go out the next day and it cracked. Because it wasn't dry enough, or there was some issue with it. And there's been some that I've thrown away out of frustration. I've tossed in the wood stove and or made kindling out of. But a lot of times, and I think it's even more as I have learned the skill a little bit better, that I will look at and maybe it's not going to be a vase, or it's not going to be this huge salad bowl, but it can be a nice decorative piece. And so you need to see things like that. And again, it's not my fault necessarily that the wood has that defect, or that's going to alter what I wanted to do with it, but thinking outside of the box, I can find something else to do with it. So I do think you have to push yourself to persevere, and I think part of that is also don't start out with projects that are way beyond your skill set.
That's just going to lead to a lot of frustration. Yeah.
So you think of some of these, and I in the woodworking magazines, many of these craftsmen are building these elaborate display cases and tables and stands, and I know I don't have that skill set. I don't have the ability to finish. I don't have the ability to do some of the things, but doesn't mean I won't try it. I just kind of lower my expectations. So I know it's not going to come out like that picture in the magazine, but I can still make it nice, and I can make it work for what I want to use it for. Yeah,
and I would say in the world of furniture and home decor, start small there as well. Don't go get a big buffet that you spent $300 on. Instead, get a small piece of furniture or a small home decor piece and hone your skills on that. I talk a lot about wash stands. It's such a tricky word for me, isn't it?
Today
it is a tricky word, but that's a really small piece of furniture that you can kind of, get your skills honed on a piece like that, or even smaller, get some home decor pieces. And it might sound like, oh, well, you're just going to paint it. That's no big deal. But there's some skill where painting is concerned. You can learn to control that paintbrush, get the paint on just right. You can learn to prep the piece. That sounds like an episode of how to prep furniture, doesn't it? Yeah, well, we'll have to dive into that. But the point is, start small and don't start off on the big projects so that you don't feel defeated right out of the gate. So I think that that's an important thing. Let's talk about dry spells, because we certainly I've been through dry spells creatively, and that's hard.
Well, I think in my case, one of the ways I like to draw, and I also like wood carving, caricature carving, and I've actually started to look at doing like birds. Oh. And so if I am...
you mean hand carving?
Yeah,
They're like carving. Little wooden statues that you've hand carved out of wood.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and I've done a few, but I researched it, realized that that's something that I really wanted to do, and so I started out and just practice. Again, nothing elaborate, because there are some tremendously talented wood carvers out there. I don't categorize myself there, but I'm learning to do faces and learning to do different things. And so starting with small projects. But if I am finding myself in a dry spell, there's nothing to do out in the wood shop, I'll put something on the lathe, or I might come in and spend a few days drawing. Just recently, my daughter had asked me to draw some pictures for our grandson to put in his room, or I'll turn to the wood carving. And so when I'm starting to tire of that, then usually there's a project somewhere else that I'm ready to start on. So I think you have to have more than one outlet of creativity.
I agree. I dabble in watercolors a little bit, and I really do enjoy that. And I'm not skilled by any means, and it's not even for the purpose of being skilled with watercolors. He's being sweet. I basically paint the same flowers over and over again, and I turned them into little greeting cards, and that's what I've done. But the main goal of learning how to watercolor was just another creative outlet. And I think that's really important, so that when you're doing the work of creative, because being in a creative business is hard. It's harder than it looks. It's not just, oh, look, she gets to sit back and paint furniture all day. It's not like that. Some days you just don't want to go paint a piece of furniture. Some days you just don't want to go to the thrift store and look for pieces to make over. I mean, that's just the reality of this business. So in order to stay creative and kind of fresh, I look at other things. Watercolors have been one of those things for me. Another thing that I love to do is bullet journaling. Now, bullet journaling is a way of keeping a date book, and I'm not going to go into the details about it here. I have a video, actually. I'll share that down in the description and in the show notes. If ever you need to get your life organized, this is the way to do it. But in that bullet journal, I have little opportunities daily to make a little bit of artwork. And it's very simple drawings, literally stick figures, nothing fancy, but it's enough creativity in about 5 or 10 minutes to just kind of spark creative thinking for the next day. So I like to do that. I like to garden. And another thing that I like to do a lot is journal. I like to just have a place to get all my thoughts out and kind of dump. Because if I have a lot of stuff going on in my life, it can get kind of clogged up in my mind, and I need to get that all out. So I just do regular journaling. I just write down my thoughts, and I find that really helps to clear my mind. And if my mind is clear, then I can go out into my workshop and be creative.
And along those lines, and I guess it's very similar to journaling, but if you find yourself in a dry spell, and make a list of things that you would like to accomplish, the things that you would like to work on, or projects you would like to do. Don't necessarily start on them, but make a list, and then kind of review that list, add to it, and as you're adding to it, maybe start making those first steps of doing some research, maybe putting a materials list together, watching a YouTube video on somebody else that's doing a similar project, and before long, the inspiration is there, or either out of necessity because you need this certain thing, or you just one day think, I'm going to do that, and you set out to do it, and you continue. But I think the most important thing we could leave you with today is don't be afraid to fail. So you may start out with a vision in your mind, and as you get towards the end, that product or project doesn't look like what you envision. That's okay. And honestly, you're the only one that knows that. So when you go and you show that to family or friends, they don't know the vision you had in your mind. They're just looking at this finished project. And I think you'll find most often they're going to see the beauty in it and the craftsmanship, and recognize the effort and the time it took you. So start out, persevere through, don't be afraid to fail. And remember that you're probably the only one that knows the flaws in that project.
Yeah. So what do you have coming up this week?
Working on the workshop still. We're still anticipating that build. Before I head back to school in August.
He's a teacher. Have we ever mentioned that here?
Yeah,
He's a
I think,
teacher.
yeah.
Okay.
So I retired from law enforcement about 10 years ago and took a job teaching criminal justice. And so I am a 10-month employee, so I am off for the summers, and so I'd like to get a little fishing in.
Yeah, so that helps with creativity.
That helps with creativity,
yes.
But it's just a kind of a mindless thing. So I think in the next week or two, I may throw my kayak in the water and go out and try to.
That sounds like a good
The
idea.
nice thing is I throw the fish back so I can lie about them, about how big they were. So when I tell the story, they're much larger than they probably actually were. But nobody knows that except me.
That's the truth. And I think I'm going to go out and do some thrifting. That is just a nice, relaxing thing. What?
We have the Eastern Shore Threshermen's Association.
Yes,
that's
in
coming up.
August.
It's the first weekend in August. If you're not familiar with it,
Let's link that down below.
Okay.
See, I'll have to figure out how to link it. I'm not really sure how.
I think they have a website. So I think you can link their website.
Okay.
But first weekend in August, and I don't remember the exact dates, but this is in Federalsburg, Maryland, which is not far from our house. And it is old-fashioned, the way they used to gather wheat. The wheat thresher with steam engines and horsepower, but a lot of antique equipment. They actually do many displays. They have parades of antique tractors and farm equipment from... A lot of it has been beautifully restored, and a lot of it has been sitting in a barn for 90 years, and it still runs and still works. There's flea markets. There's good food. There's music.
Flea markets.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to do, and I know we try to go every year, and it's just a lot of fun. So if you're in the area or close to the area, that may be something you want to check out.
I'll put the website link down below so we can get the dates right. I don't want to get the dates, but when we go visit, and we'll make sure that we share that with everybody here.
So be on the lookout for it. We want to ask you to please subscribe and follow Cindy on the YouTube at Reinvented Delaware. Also her blog at reinventeddelaware.com.
We're Reinvented Delaware everywhere, aren't we?
We are Reinvented Delaware. And if you have a question or a comment, and she shares them with me, so you can reach, if you have something specifically for me, it is Cindy at reinventeddelaware.com. And just tell her, hey, this question's for Steve. She'll pass it on, and we'll get back with you. We also want to first thank those of you that have left. We've received some of the kindest comments from many of you, and it really inspires us and encourages us to keep going. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and follow. The subscriptions really help us out. Also, leave us a 5-star review. And even if you don't like us, if you think this is the worst podcast I've ever listened to, leave us a 5-star review. Nobody knows but you.
Yeah.
So we do sincerely appreciate those of you that watch, those of you that take the time to make a comment. And we read them, and they're very inspiring for us. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for listening. Thanks for watching over on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.